I was living in a residential area and was buying some cigarettes at a supermarket before heading home. Then a young lady walked in to buy something. In that moment, I thought my heart had stopped. She was so beautiful, it was hard to believe a woman like her lived in our neighborhood. She walked into the supermarket with a poker face, her black hair flowing neatly down to her waist. She was wearing white stockings with black heels, which made her legs look even longer. Even at first glance, she had a pretty face, despite living in this neighborhood for a decade. This was the first time I had seen her. She was so beautiful that I couldn't help but stare. The moment I saw her, my heart started to beat faster. She left with some groceries, and I quietly followed her to see where she lived. Her house was very close to mine, in a narrow place where only a single car could barely fit. I roughly memorized the location of her house. From that day on, I waited for her every evening at the supermarket. I waited for her every day, buying this and that, but it was in vain. I thought maybe she had only come to this neighborhood once, or perhaps she didn't live here. Then one Sunday afternoon, I saw her coming out of the women's bath at the public bathhouse. I was so glad to see her that I almost greeted her, but I didn't make that mistake. She was beautiful with her bare face, white and smooth skin. However, there was a little girl next to her. The girl asked, "Mom, can I sleep at Grandma's house tonight?" Here is the continuation of your story translated into English. I told her that I worked in the president's office. When she said she had never seen me at work, she approached me, asking incredulously if I really was the president. I asked if she lived in the neighborhood, and I said that I lived just around the corner. She invited me to come in and have a cup of coffee. She lived in an 18-pyong, approximately 60 square meters, townhouse with her daughter. There were men's shoes in the entrance. She told me she was separated from her husband, but I felt that was a defensive statement. People without a husband letting others know of the existence of a husband. She looked so beautiful drinking coffee with her feet neatly together. I took her photo off her resume and kept it in my wallet, hoping to get closer to her. A month passed, and during that time, I had coffee at her house twice and had dinner with her and her daughter. I didn't realize that living close could be such a big advantage. We started to exchange light jokes. Her daughter would come to my house to play on Sundays. I read a lot of books when I was young, and I utilized that to tell her old stories, which she loved. On Mondays when I met her, she would say, "Mr. President, please do the dishes right away." Her daughter had told her mother about my living situation. I told her that I worked in the president's office. When she said she had never seen me at work, she approached me, asking incredulously if I really was the president. I asked if she lived in the neighborhood, and I said that I lived just around the corner. She invited me to come in and have a cup of coffee. She lived in approximately 60 square meters townhouse with her daughter. There were men's shoes in the entrance. She told me she was separated from her husband, but I felt that was a defensive statement. People without a husband letting others know of the existence of a husband. She looked so beautiful drinking coffee with her feet neatly together. I took her photo off her resume and kept it in my wallet, hoping to get closer to her. A month passed, and during that time, I had coffee at her house twice and had dinner with her and her daughter. I didn't realize that living close could be such a big advantage. We started to exchange light jokes. Her daughter would come to my house to play on Sundays. I read a lot of books when I was young, and I utilized that to tell her old stories, which she loved. On Mondays when I met her, she would say, "Mr. President, please do the dishes right away." Her daughter had told her mother about my living situation. The biggest workshop of our company was held. Over 100 employees and executives stayed at a resort in Sirexen for 2 nights and 3 days. She also came, but not long after the event started. She got a call that her child had a high fever. All the other employees had come by bus, and I was the only one who had brought a car. I drove her home worried. She was anxious, contacting her mother who was looking after her child, and when we arrived home, her daughter was lying down weakly. Her mother said she would go home now. I suggested she stay the night as it was late, but she said she had nothing to do now that the mother was here and went home. She took the medicine bag from her mother and checked her daughter's temperature. Fortunately, her daughter's fever had gone down. She seemed very flustered. I asked for the thinnest towel and cooled her daughter's forehead with lukewarm water. She asked me to look after her daughter for a moment, and I reassured her and put her daughter to bed in the master bedroom. When I came out to the living room, thinking her fever had gone down a bit, she had prepared some drinks. She thanked me for driving her home and suggested I get some rest, saying I must be tired from all the driving. I thought to myself, what in the world? But I politely agreed. She thanked me for caring for her daughter and for not being able to attend the workshop because of her. She didn't drink because she was worried about her daughter, and I had a little bit of alcohol. Despite her flustered state, she made a delicious bowl of sea snail soup. As we sat facing each other and talked about various things, she told me that she lost her husband in an accident less than a year after giving birth to her daughter. She couldn't work because her daughter was young, but she moved to this neighborhood where her mother lives 3 months ago because her mother said she would look after her daughter once she starts elementary school next year. Her daughter is 7 years old now and goes to an academy in the afternoon. Her mother picks her up from the academy and takes her home to feed her dinner. She said it was hard raising her daughter alone, and it broke her heart to see her daughter growing up lonely without a father. People around her suggested that she remarry, but she said she couldn't muster the courage yet and wanted to take her time to think about remarriage. She asked me if I was married, and I told her that I had opportunities to marry the women I had met, but everything fell through due to complicated issues. As we shared various conversations, the alcohol started to take effect and fatigue began to set in. She said, I've laid out a futon in the small room, please sleep there. When I entered the room, a silk golden quilt that one would use in a newlywed's home was neatly laid out. She said she would sleep in the master bedroom, and I thanked her for the delicious food. I covered myself with the fluffy quilt and fell asleep, but was awakened by the need to use the bathroom. When I opened the bathroom door, she was inside. She had just finished showering and was drying off. She covered herself in surprise, and I apologized and turned away. She quickly went back into her room, and I went to the bathroom and returned to my room. But I couldn't fall asleep. I was certain that God existed. A little later, the door to my room silently opened, and someone slipped under the covers. She said, Thank you so much for yesterday, sir. My daughter's fever has gone down. Can we be together today? She had a faint fragrance. I was thrilled to finally be one with her, whom I had been secretly in love with. After making love, I stroked her hair and she snuggled into my arms. She said she had been so lonely without her husband, and that she would never forget this time. She quietly locked the door and came to me, and we had another wonderful time. When dawn came and her daughter went to kindergarten, we had another wonderful time. After that, we registered our marriage and moved to an apartment. A few months later, now a 12-week-old baby is in her lovely belly. We became a couple after the workshop. I hired a helper for the morning and afternoon to ensure that my beloved ladies lack nothing in their daily lives. She commutes with me and plans to take maternity leave right before her due date. My daughter is growing up very smart. She follows me well and calls me Dad, and we have a good time in bed with her now that she's in a stable period. Now all that's left is to live happily with her, whom I happened to meet at the supermarket. I am a lucky man.